Commander?
What is it, Cotton?
I'd like to requisition a new piece of equipment.
Okay, fine. What is it?
A slow motion button.
A what?
A slow motion button.
But why?
Well, this is what a dragon piercer looks and sounds like in normal speed. And this is what it's like in slow motion.
I'll get the smithy right on it.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, get ready for an absolute party. Because today I am bringing you one of my favorite builds in the entire game. It may not be a usual time of year associated with fireworks, but after the build I'm here to show you today, you'll be lighting them off one after another.
What? That's so cool. What's happening? This is so cool. What's going on?
Because that's right, today is the day of the Dragon Piercer. So without further ado, my lovable little lilies, today I present you with a little build I like to call Bolt Piercer.
That's the most badass thing I've ever heard.
Starting off with why this build exists, followed by what the build itself actually is, and then the playstyle to adopt while using the build. As for why, I mean, if you have to ask me why you'd want to hunt monsters with Dragon Piercer, then you probably already missed its largest appeal. The absolute visual spectacle that playing this build gives you. And honestly, not just you, but your hunting partners as well, because this build is called Bolt Piercer because it looks like a literal lightning strike making its way through the monster, and it is just absolutely gorgeous in my opinion. This build is also, of course, particularly effective. The best Dragon Piercer builds in base world were surprisingly good as well, but I am telling you right now that the best Dragon Piercer build in Iceborne puts every single one of those to shame.
Well, duh.
And not only does it do more damage than the old builds, even in comparison to Master Rank Monster Health, but it gets tons of flinches and part breaks galore. The build is extremely mobile, and the introduction of the tenderizing mechanic lends itself extremely well to Dragon Piercer itself, but I'll get further into that in the playstyle section of the video. Moving on to the build then, we'll start off with the weapon itself, which for this build will be RageGaming's Beast King Thunderbow, as it is capable of incredible raw attack values, a non-crippling amount of negative affinity, the ability to use power coating, and then just some thunder damage into 4 slot is a pure bonus. Augments for the most offensively potent version of this build are just straight up double attack, though if you want to be a little bit safer, there is nothing all that wrong with switching that up, however, if you'd like to fit a health regen augment in there, as it just leads to slightly lower damage.
You sound insane. Do you realize that?
As far as the equipment itself goes, it's not that hard at all to have a guess at most of the skills we have going here. First up, Velkhana 4-set Frostcraft. This build focuses around a draw attack, which means we'll be sheathing, which means Frostcraft and its beautiful 30% damage buff will be totally and completely active. En route to achieving this, we also gain Velkhana 2-set of Crit Element, which conveniently does affect the small amount of thunder damage that we have on this bow. However, Dragon Piercer doesn't have great elemental motion values, so that is just a tiny little side bonus that satisfies my need for a clean bill of skills. On top of this, we are also using the Shara Ishvalda Beta chest for Coalescence, which if you haven't experienced it yet, is just an absolutely fantastic skill in 9 builds out of 10 in Iceborne. Every time you recover from a blight or status, you gain significant bonuses to your attack, element attack, and status buildup for a full 90 seconds. And you can trigger it against literally any monster in the game by getting stunned, if absolutely nothing else, which even if you aren't actively seeking it, happens to all of us once in a while. That is, assuming you aren't a top tier speedrunner. This skill is also why the Velkhana Waste is Alpha instead of Beta, as it completes the Coalescence skill without the need for any of those pesky decorations. Speaking of which, as we start to fill the decorations here, you'll start to see a lot of skills that just straight punch up the damage of Dragon Piercer. And as a whole set, these skills are 5 Agitator, which gives us a ton of attack as well as 10% affinity when a monster is enraged. This build is only at a full 100% crit when the skill is active, as the 10% directly counteracts the negative 10% that comes base on the RageGaming bow. 3 critical boost, as this is pretty much a 100% crit build, 3 critical draw for the main chunk of 100% affinity, 3 coalescence, 2 health boost, which is pretty much mandatory in endgame, 2 piercing shots, which in this case is just a massive buff to all damage this build does, 2 special ammo boost, which functions just the same, bow charge plus, which adds an extra level of charge to your bow, which directly translates to more damage, the Velkhana 2-set and 4-set of Crit Element and Frostcraft, and then 2 Divine Blessing, 2 flinch free, and 1 Quick Sheath as extra skills as a byproduct of the Velkhana set pieces. However, the Divine Blessing is always welcome, and the Quick Sheath does absolutely help in a Dragon Piercer build.
I didn't ask for these powers.
I was given them.
You'll also want to be using Evasion Mantle, as not only is the evasion part quite useful when charging up your Dragon Piercer, but the 30% damage bonus from properly dodging with it equipped is just absolutely massive. And then second up for mantles should be Glider. The mantle itself isn't all that impressive, however it houses 2 4 slots, an extremely high mantle uptime and an extremely low cooldown, meaning that this mantle essentially just acts as the bonus skill mantle. Now, as you might expect, my jewel collection is not perfect, and that's why this doesn't look quite right. The critical boost in the Velkhana glove should be a 4-slot jewel of crit boost combined with vitality for a final health boost, and both of the attack jewels in the Glider mantle should actually be attack plus for 2 attack boost each. The evasion mantle, however, I have actually left open as these slots require you as the hunter to actually make a choice. The technically more efficient use of these slots is peak performance. However, this skill is only active as long as you are at full health, so if you don't think you can maintain that for a large portion of the hunt, these slots are better served by just having 2 basic attack jewels in them. However, for the sake of this demonstration, I've had peak performance in the entire time.
Because I'm that good. One more time for emphasis. I'm that good.
As for the playstyle of this build, it shouldn't surprise you one bit that the only real attack that you want to use is, of course, Dragon Piercer. And just to whet your appetite a little bit, in the training room with no outside buffs outside of power coding, which you should always have active anyways, this build hits the post for 221 per tick. The best pre-Iceborne Dragon Piercer build in the same situation hit the training post for 131 per tick. That difference is already pretty insane. However, putting that in perspective, that number is before taking into account Coalescence on the new build, which cannot activate in training, as well as Agitator, which cannot activate in training, and this isn't including either the decorations in our mantles or the actual buff of Evasion Mantle itself. That number would be much larger. In fact, with everything active in a regular hunt situation, this build, this number is approximately this large. Yeah, that's right. With everything active to a Seething Basilge's tail, this build is capable of doing 226 damage per tick of Dragon Piercer, which may sound less impressive, but a Seething Basilge's tail hit zone is only 55, as opposed to the training post at 80. So some quick hit zone adjustment math puts this Dragon Piercer at approximately 277 damage when compared to the same hit zone that the old best Dragon Piercer hit for 147 when completely buffed up. So to say the least, this build does some absolutely meaty damage.
Living large, boy. Living so large.
But as with anything, you have to understand how to actually use it to get its peak performance. Since we are using Dragon Piercer with crit draw, you have to use it as a draw attack. This is done by unsheathing by holding your right trigger and then activating Dragon Piercer with your trigger still held down. Your Dragon Piercer is affected by the bow's charge level, so you want to max out your charge before firing that beautiful firecracker arrow. There are 2 particularly effective ways to do this in combat, and which one you choose depends entirely on what your target is doing at that moment. The first method is simply holding right trigger after you draw until the bow is fully charged. As long as you don't aim with left trigger, you have fantastic freedom of movement and can easily dodge most quick attacks without actually pressing the dodge button and canceling your charge. The second method is using one of your aimed down dodges in the middle here to increase your charge level. This is technically faster, and this dodge is incredible at avoiding singular large attacks. However, unless the monster is attacking someone else, this can be an extremely risky move.
All creative people take risks.
An important thing to note when playing a Dragon Piercer build as well is that sometimes there just isn't a proper opening to go for a shot, and that's okay. Avoid the monster's attacks and find your openings. Remember, a daring hunter does do a lot of damage, but a dead hunter does no damage. As for tenderization while solo, it shouldn't be a focus by any means. This set is built to crit without weakness exploit. Your shots are expected to go through multiple different parts at once, and you don't get Temporal Mantle to make it easier either. And in fact, even in openings that would normally be great for clutch clawing, in this build you would absolutely rather be lining up the perfect Dragon Piercer. That said, this is one of the main reasons that this build absolutely excels in multiplayer. Don't get me wrong, this build is absolutely serviceable for solo hunts and it'll do you well, but multiplayer is where it's at. Your hunting partners will almost certainly tenderize multiple parts of the monster, and on top of this, the monster has more targets to attack, meaning you'll be left alone to charge Dragon Piercers far more often than you otherwise would. I mean, you're watching it, it, this build just absolutely shreds monsters in multiplayer.
They're moving in herds.
As for aiming the attack within this build, weaker parts are always nice, but keep in mind that Dragon Piercer is really about getting the most ticks possible, meaning always aim your shot for the longest stretch of monster that you can get from the angle you're at. Follow all of this, and soon you too can be carving monsters in twain with this absolutely gorgeous ability. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been one of my favorite Iceborne builds, Bolt Piercer. Did you like this build? What weird skill or weapon attack would you like to see us make a build with next? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.